most of the promises made they seem to feel that it's not being lived up to, one. Secondly, they would like to understand what sort of organization structure would be best suited for them. So all these small nuances, including where would they get this type of skill that they want to do it? Means HR needs to give business the perspective that should we do that work from Hyderabad? Should we do it from Philippines? Is this skill set going to be available in Europe? Or where is this going to be available and where we should be doing it? So one is that competency. So your front-ending skills with the clients probably is of huge demand, which need not be necessarily true in a manufacturing setup. But again, let's reflect back. In that scalability of a manufacturing setup, probably your ability to manage unions, probably your ability to scale up and do conflict resolutions are much more significantly higher. So I think the demands are different as we scale up. And it's for you to choose actually how you're going to build that capability, because to me, at least my perception is that that day is not far away where actually it will become a level playing field in terms of competencies. And in the year 2009, 2010, when there was an economic downturn, actually we saw that even in our industry. And I've seen in many places, a lot of handicaps in terms of the ability of people who did not see the other side of the world in order to scale up to that requirement. So that's my perspective.
Oh, great. Thank you. So if I were to consolidate the inputs that I have received from the four of you, first of all, thank you very much for some really brilliant insights. I would like to just consolidate the discussion before we open it up for the audience and some social media queries which have come through. So interestingly, there are 4 stages that collectively that you have talked about. So know what competencies are required within the HR function, given the context of what business you are in, what stage of growth you are in, and what you're dealing with. Stay responsive or dive in, listen to the customers, understand what is needed. So that responsiveness is something which came across, and specifically in the stories around COEs to industry verticals kind of shifts, or the GVK Bioscience example of listening to customer feedback and looking at doing it differently. The third element, once you have understood or once you have listened to what is required, there is a critical requirement for the human resources function to dissect behaviors. And that was something which was beautifully touched upon by you, Suresh, where you said that understanding business is not alone. You should be able to dissect the behavioral side, because that's where HR seriously adds value. And for me personally, I think one of the most significant takeaways was that if you seek strengths, so the examples that I was pretty impressed with was the ITC food story, the dairy or the AMD engineers and OEM relationship kind of examples. These are things which create the future. So if you know what competencies are required, you use those to stay responsive to what the business needs and the customer needs. You understand the behavioral side, because that's what HR is good at. You are able to find out what strengths exist in the organization and craft something which is really beautiful and which is really forward-looking for the organization. I thought that it was a very fascinating insight into the real-life examples that all 4 of you shared. I have benefited a lot from it. And with that, we would now throw open the Q&A session to the audience for any questions. I just have one request. If anybody has a question, just state your name and your organization and the question. And the question, my request is that the question should end with a question mark and should not be more than 1 sentence long. Okay, so with that, we would like to throw it open for the Q&A.
Good evening all. Muninder, I represent the organization by name Sadhguru, which is into management consulting. I don't know who in the panel would answer my question, but a question to Samir. what kind of key indicators do you see that the HR is instrumental in building businesses?
So key indicators that HR contributes to building.
Yes.
That's the question, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that.
So if you really look at it, okay, means I think building a business starts from an HR perspective, first about competencies of people around, okay. I heard that example about AMD doing an assessment and building competencies. Let me give you an example. Once we came out of the downturn of 2009, 2010, a lot of companies across the globe actually went back and looked at what were the competencies of its people. The competencies that were relevant prior to the economic downturn or the blip were no longer relevant. So one, first of all, what's the competencies and do your people around have competencies? Second is, if they don't, then how do you gauge and bridge that? The second is, then every budgeting exercise that happens by the business, at least from an organization standpoint that I belong to, we are a clear checker of that process. Because at the end of the day, once that happens and is committed, that's actually reported to the street, right? So we clearly look at it, that is there a process check about how leaders are committing to those overall numbers and the roll-ups that are happening. Second. Third, once those numbers are committed, you need resources to deliver, right? So when you require resources to deliver, how do you partner and decide how those resources are going to come in, where they're going to come from, and the scalability of that whole environment. So I think fundamentally to me, these three are clear indicators where we partner. Third, more important, and with respect to the matrix organization, once you've decided what your objectives for the year are, you need to derive and set up the goals. I think in a matrix structure, our biggest challenge today is that we talk about 2 in a box goals, etc. But in how many organizations are they really working, right? At the end of the day, you have a functional leader and you have a line manager, so-called, or delivery operating people. How much of their goals are overlapping? Are they equally responsible for delivering a particular goal? Who's monitoring that? Who's checking that? I think those are the indicators which will derive there is an HR system aligned to the overall objectives of driving growth or not.
Just on a point.
Yeah.
I understood a question in a slightly different way and I'm responding. If I were to, the way I understood your question, how do we know whether HR is contributing to the business or not? I have a very, very simple indicator. Are you being invited by your peer group for conversations on issues not related to HR? If that is happening, to me that's the simplest indicator that HR is contributing to the business. Distinction, if you're being invited because of a protocol, that's not invitation. Where you're not ideally needed to be there, but still you're being invited, then you have arrived.
You were saying something.
Prabhakar has touched upon, are you sitting in the business set along with in a critical meetings is one of the indicator. But with respect to metrics perspective, what kind of metric my CEO sees that one, cost of manpower with respect to your competition is important metric. Because if I can get similar results with less manpower cost, I'm successful. My CEO measures me on that. Second, lead indicators, other lead indicators is employee engagement scores and other key talent attrition, recruitment cycle times. In addition to that, what your organization known for, some capability like Infosys, now it is a different context, but yesterday about leadership. So if you are known for some kind of people practices and these kind of capabilities, those are all the indicators that HR has contributed.
Thank you. Yeah.
This is Lakshmi Sridhar from Global Hospitals. My question is, what is the role of HR in unorganized structure? For example, industries like healthcare and retail and also in real estate? Because what you all spoke about is purely structured environment. But what is the role of and challenges that an HR faces in the unorganized structure, and how do we overcome these challenges? Thank you.
Thank you. Any of you would like to take that?
I think great question, because we all tend to look at process, structure, and it's a comfort zone for everyone, and there's a predictability about it. One of the key tenets of HR, while we're talking about all these dynamics, is also about risk appetite. So if there is an organization, like the examples you've just quoted, where there is more of an unstructured approach, how do you really make sense out of it? What is the key driver for a healthcare industry to go? Who are the key stakeholders? I would ask those questions. And those questions, I mean, whether you have a structure or a framework out there or not doesn't matter. The human resources, or someone who drives human resources and the team who drives it in a healthcare industry or certain other real estate and so on, again, it's about sustenance and scale. Depends on what life cycle this particular entity or organization is in, and what's the vision and mission of that particular entity. So if you have to drive those, what would help you? Do you want to create structures? Do you not want to create structures? Which model is helping? Because ultimately, it's just a pretext for you to talk about a centralized or a decentralized model or a matrix, because it suits you to drive a particular strategy home, and you continue to keep your business thriving, because otherwise you don't exist. As simple as that. So I think it's more of that risk appetite, managing uncertainty. So how do you acquire talent? Whether it's doctors you're bringing in, nurses you're bringing in, because there are your human resource talent really in a healthcare industry. What is their customer service portfolio like? What is their skill set? How do you hone that skill set? Because they're competent in what they deliver, because in a technical sense we say, but they're customer facing. So they're dealing with patients. So how do you build in that acumen? What kind of talent development pieces would the human resources string in without really stepping onto their toes? Because again, as I gave the example of engineering intensive industry, where they're making the next state of the art kind of a chip, why would they listen to someone who doesn't even know what is the ABCD of a chip design? But they would listen and understand when they look at it as a value proposition, and it really brings in the returns. So how do you
It is a evolution of HR. Those industries, even today, HR manages admin, nothing wrong on that. The challenge is that it's very transaction function, admin you keep along with HR. The expectation of CEO has positioned your function very weakly in the minds of your business head, correct? Because admin also which you know. And so that is one of the reasons you need to negotiate the positioning of your function with the director or a CEO, MD or a CEO. That's the first success to move up to change the perspective of HR function. These are the two derivatives I see that practices as
Just wanted to give my perspective on the unorganized sector part of it. We are in the agri business, and farmers is a big human resource base for us. Likewise, when you're handling huge commodities, the whole thing of this loading and unloading workers is again a huge piece. I think two important things, at least that I have seen working. Very often it's a question of mindset. We think that loading unloading wala hai, mistri hai, apan ko usse kya hai, nothing to do with this. If as HR you are able to drive in a mindset across the organization, there might be people who are doing loading and unloading, but the most fundamental is treat them with dignity. I think if you are able to drive that one important point of ensuring that whichever sector or whatever nature of work will treat them with dignity, that makes a huge, huge difference. The second thing we've noticed is when you're looking at farmers, in fact today the biggest HR challenge is in the farming community, the labor shortage. Just not getting people to work in the field. That's a classic HR challenge that we need to work on. So how do you convert a challenge into something which is core to your competence? So if you're looking at contract farming, which is nothing but a whole play of risk and reward sharing. And that is what we do in HR when we are looking at performance management or incentives. How do we translate those principles of reward and risk management while you are designing the scheme for the contract farmers? So how do you correlate with what is relevant for you could be a second way to deal with the unorganized?
Thanks, Solay. So before we take, I would just like to try and weave in questions which came in through the social media. So this was a question which came through social media, but I think the gentleman is in this room. So how to ensure that with business growth and scale, how does HR and other corporate functions do not become a faceless bureaucracy? That's the question. So if business grows, HR will achieve scale as well. How do you ensure that it doesn't become a bureaucracy of sorts? Yeah.
The moment you talk about bureaucracy, there are two aspects to it, right? At least if not more. One is you're looking at the response time. Because bureaucracy is the red tape we are thinking about, the negativity of it, which is, you have to go through multiple gates, and it's going to talk about a lot of either legal or certain governance or compliance, blah, blah, blah. So it takes n number of days, or the cycle delay, in other words, the response times. So that's where bureaucracy hurts you. So how does, when we're talking about HR, we also become the guardians and the gatekeepers in certain ways. What do I mean by that? We look at the compliance and governance, obviously, because you will have to be risk-free or keep your company as clean as possible from a legal risks, statutory mandates in the countries you operate, and so on and so forth. Agreed. But at the same time, can you bring in agility so that you build in transparency on the compliance elements so that bureaucracy or the red tape gets cut? So they know what are the non-negotiables very clearly. Is it out there so that everyone can see it? So there is nothing hidden. So you know exactly that's what it means. Non-negotiables are clearly laid out. The negotiables is where you'll have to clearly set the expectations and tell them how much time it would take from a particular request. Talk to business client groups with respect to, maybe it's the due diligence one of us talked about earlier, when you're acquiring, merging, any of these large moves, HR is involved in it. How much time does it take? Even if you move in and take a call on it, the business client groups need to have. For instance, I'll give you an example from what we have done. We've done what we call as a heat map. Now, what do we mean by heat map on talent? We're saying, okay, if you want to move into this particular community, this particular region, this particular country, this is what it takes, right? To enter and set up shop. You may be looking at infrastructure, you may be looking at talent cost. We've done that as well. Which are the low cost geographies, high cost geographies, what's the talent supply? All that is one. The other is if you want to exit. Because you have to look at all aspects of business. If you want to exit, is it easy or more complex? Because in some it's very easy for you to get started, and especially from talent markets, but you might have a huge play to exit from those markets. Europe is a great example, several of those European markets. So it actually has a much higher cost play for you to exit any single employee, and a tenured employee, it's really tougher. So those are the ones, unless you really apprise at the forefront and talk about it, then you don't have to worry about it. It's all about setting expectations at the word go or much earlier, proactively, rather than wait for them to come and everything is ready, then the HR starts speaking. Obviously, you will be termed as bureaucrats with no value or less value.
Just wanted to, from a more than, I'm looking at a scale in a slightly different context. ITC is basically an Indian company where different parts of the country we operate. And it's slightly paradoxical when visibility of HR or face of HR. One visibility and face of HR is reflected in the systems and processes that you put in place, and which is what Kiran was also doing. Strangely enough, I found in moments of crisis, whether it's personal or professional, if HR is seen there, the multiplier effect is far better than being seen when a positive situation happens. And that is something which, at least we in ITC drive in, that if there is a crisis of any kind, HR should be there as soon as possible. And that storytelling that happens across the organization, it also sort of reinforces the culture, and that gets me for doing the stickiness and everything. So that's very, very important. Very often I've seen the younger generation shying away to go at times of crisis. They think it's a non-life. And that's a fantastic opportunity for you to show that you are there.
Fundamentally, what we are assuming that when business scaled up, we are also assuming that HR team and HR systems have scaled up. It's assumption, okay? I'll tell you why that is one. In my previous company, CA Technologies Limited, formerly known as Computer Associate, the business growth and HR team growth need not have a direct correlation, because we used innovative delivery models across the board, because they may have more than 50 offices, sizable offices. I'm talking not one, not two people. They did it one model called RPO, okay. Second model called HRO. I'm a global lead steering committee member for both RPO and HRO there. Third model through cloud-based technologies. So if you go with RPO, your recruitment, HR in-house function, that is not my key focus area on day-to-day basis. We outsource to a company, a global company, ex-company, which has India outfit here. The HR transaction work, we outsource to some other global company. And we can scale it up. If your company become 30,000 employees, I'm not going to be worried. It is my pain of technology, pain of my RPO and HRO partner to scale it up, and where my role, my involvement, my bureaucracy is not going to stop them. It is purely SLA-driven services to them. So my observation is, need not be bureaucracy, need not grow up because the business is growing up. There are innovative business model, HR delivery models. As a HR heads, we need to focus on them.
Just wanted to add a few perspectives. One of them being that, at the end of the day, bureaucracy is a word, which is a reflection of what you commit. So the question is HR a yes man to the company, or HR has its own views and thought process before you're committing to the employees, businesses, etc. The second is on policies. Most of the time, while systems and processes typically come with the flow, policies typically are perceived as being bureaucratic in nature. It's very important, therefore, that with a growing environment, and since you're talking about HR's partnership in growth of a business, it's extremely important to understand that what's true for a stable state need not be true for a growing environment. And how do policies be nimble-footed to change to their ecosystem? For example, what's true for a skill set? Say you want to hire a typical niche skill set of people. In that, are you as a CND leader of the company not understanding what the market benchmarks are? It's your lack of understanding to scale up to that requirement which is forcing the business to suffer. And thirdly, whenever you're doing mergers and acquisitions, do you have a toolkit that is setting up an expectation upfront with the group that what can they expect fundamentally in all this change? Do they perceive that as an upfront expectation, or do they react to your ability to actually deliver without you being able to set the expectation upfront without a toolkit? So in our organization, we've got toolkits which really sensitizes folks that what they can expect in sort of various environments. Could be mergers and acquisitions, could be going to a new country to set up a delivery site, etc.
Thank you. Yeah, any other questions?
I'm A.K. Agarwal, Director of Agarwal Package and Movers. We have the 1,500 packing crews in country, in 100 offices. The challenge to HR department is how to train all these 1,500 people in 100 cities. Mostly the people are uneducated because they are packing crews or they are supervisors around 12th grade or maximum BA from Hindi or Telugu or regional medium. That's the bigger challenge to us.
What systems can be set up to train the packing crew, which is about 1,500 people? Most of them are not educated and they are spread across 100 cities. They're not very willing to travel, they're not tech savvy. Even when we travel, most of them are working. On-job training is one part of it, but still the kind of professionalism that we want to bring into them, that's a challenge as to how to treat these people effectively.
What industry is this, please?
Packing and moving, relocation basically, Agarwal Packers and Movers.
Got it.
I can relate to the challenge because
Loading and unloading.
more than loading and unloading, our own people, the frontline people, they are spread around 150 locations. And these are people that probably may not be, but at least a BA, BCom, sort of thing going on. So we're doing two things in terms of the capability development. I think at the end of it, all of them are consumers or customers in some. I think what we started was, we got them to start thinking, saying, if something were to be packing for you, what would you expect? So rather than describing this is what we do, getting them to sort of engage in the conversation. So that was, we started off with that sort of a mindset. The second thing that we started off with was saying that it needs constant reinforcement, especially in very dispersed organizations. And you don't have the hierarchy to keep reinforcing that. We took support of visual control systems. The area where they are operating from, etc. Day in and day out, they see certain visuals of this is how things need to be done. It starts happening. The third thing that we did was very simple, just a simple what we call as non-referral cards, which is there in their pocket, visual description of what are those 6 or 7 important things that they should be conscious of. We just did 2-3 simple things like this, and every time when somebody is going or visiting there, just checking whether these things are in place or not, is how we actually started doing it.
I'm sorry, I'm just continuing one more question to this thing. How frequently do you think these kind of discussions with them or meeting them and reinforcing, rather that's right, how frequently should the reinforcement happen?
See, it would depend again in a context. If say you're losing people every 3 months, 6 months,
We don't lose people.
you don't lose people. Then, and that's a simple.
There's amazing sense of belonging with all these people. Amazing and really good sense of belonging. They own the organization. They understand. They're also sensitized. But making them professional is the challenge.
What we saw it was the first 1 or 2 years, we needed to do it at least once in quarters of the sales. And once they sort of reached a particular stage, we shifted gears. We didn't do a capability intervention. We started saying that we will engage with you on an annual basis. And in that engagement, when we are sort of communicating, we started reinforcing certain messages. And in that particular session, we were sort of getting customers to come and talk as to how they felt very, very happy of their experience with the packer. That now starts acting as a reinforcement. You don't leverage the power of customers. If you do it in the first quarter, it will not work. Give it a time, 1 year, 18 months, and then start getting customers to appreciate what they are doing. That works.
I would add to what Prabhakar was mentioning, because this resonates with the direct labor we work with in manufacturing units in Asia. There is a situation in one of the countries where there is a talent supply shortage. So they had to really import labor, or as we say, the workforce from elsewhere into the fab unit, which started anyway. There was a government initiative, which is a larger play. The country I'm referring to is Malaysia. So interestingly, we found people from Nepal, a lot of South countries actually, moving in there, and Indonesia, Philippines, and so on and so forth, who come in, but to train them, because they really need to know, and it's with such precision, because quality is really important. The language is a huge barrier. Who would train them? How would they get trained? And it should be, in terms of the cost, productivity, efficiency, if you start, and quality, it should be really, really critical. So some of the pieces, as Prabhakar mentioned, and the distributed workforces. We have fab units in different parts, and there are all these corporate work. One is the compliance piece, as we talked about, how do you ensure and so on. Then the other piece is how do you ensure consistency based on, because they're all maybe not only the certification, as you have mentioned, right? Their sensitivity towards, and they're not only interacting with people. Here it's about getting that chip into the right slot, and how do they really, because anything which goes in, and there's a lot of sanitation and multiple other pieces, they themselves do not have a hygiene and a public sanity awareness because of where they have come from and their means of livelihood. And so there is a huge gamut of other things we really have to work with them. And that's the videos, as we said. Training was done, the repetitive, predictability and so on, and language is there. So they had to translate it into some of their own native languages, but largely it was not the language, but it's more of the visual, where they can see step 1 to step 2 to step 3. And the connectivity with what they do, how does it impact? What they create, even a careless mistake or an innocent mistake, how does it translate? And some of the stories, and they heard, so we started filming even someone who they can resonate with. And that is repeated. And they have interactive pieces footage, so they can go and learn their own language as well. So all those pieces really help. Initially it was a huge challenge. Retention was not a challenge because there was a lot of excitement and they could see. And then they were taken to other avenues. That's another investment we made. Whenever we can bring in groups, they were brought in and they could actually hear from others and connect with them, and that starts resonating. So some of these clear interventions where they were focused, committed, way of investing in that particular talent group helped us create that glow stick. And then also talked about the other things which you mentioned is that etiquette or owning other skills. That comes in when you want to create a bench strength and want to move them up in terms of their own professional ladder growth. Once we started talking to them, where can they go? So you look at their high potentials among them and start working with them and make them as supervisors perhaps for a smaller group. So you start honing some of those skills which are required, tap into those, observe what are those competencies. It's an investment definitely. Initially it looks as a heavy investment, especially if it's fragmented or distributed teams, but later it all comes into play. But you need to have the clear vision. Can I take them? Up to what stage can they grow? You'll have to set up those expectations as a child.
So I can only share I'm a moderator, I'm not supposed to give inputs anyways. No. But I can only share a very interesting perspective because I have moved houses so many times. Think of an alternative talent model. Why don't you have women supervisors for moving and shifting? Because usually it's my wife who has to deal with all the men who walk into the house. Men are not very good organizers, okay? Men are not very good at organizing stuff. Women can empathize, they know what stuff goes where. I think that's an alternative talent model you should explore.
You've got value for this.
Any more questions?
And during the discussion, one of the points that came is HR's role and value, although it is considered to be a strategic business partner for the business, it is said that it's indicated when they are, in the board meetings, etc., when they are contributing in that sort of forum. The question is, what's the measure for HR to be participating and to be able to enter into such forum. That is one. And two is, Dr. Kiranmai, this will be straight to you. When I was in the services organization, we hired an external consultant to tell us where we were going wrong and how to rectify it. Today, being in a consulting environment, I do the job for different clients. So when you were in situation with the deficits, etc., was it something that the HR was able to identify